Tonight on America's Hope, we're joined by Mike Huckabee and Michele Bachman as they focus on America. America's Hope starts now.
This is America's Hope from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Kelly Wright.
Hello and welcome to America's Hope. I'm Kelly Wright, and I do hope that wherever you are, you're safe and well, taking care of yourself and your family because you matter. And now that we're this close to the presidential election, well, politics matters. Many of you are quite concerned about it. Some of you are even undecided. And we're going to hear from two people who actually ran for president of the United States. Mike Huckabee stops by to talk to us, as well as Michele Bachman. And their focus will be on America. And then later in the program, we'll hear from Dr. A.J. Nolte. He heads up the Israel Institute at Regent University. We'll hear what he has to say about Generation Z understanding the difficulties in terms of the war that Israel is having with Iran and its proxies. Let's get started.
But without any sense of hyperbole, this really is the most important election. And it truly will determine the direction of our country, not so much for old guys like me. You know, I'm close enough to the finish line. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not planning on being there tonight, okay? But my burden is for my 7 grandchildren. That's who I fear for, because they're going to grow up and already are growing up in a culture that is radically different than the one I grew up with. And I don't want them to grow up in a culture where that a 12-year-old can't get a tattoo, buy liquor, buy tobacco, can't enter into a contract, get married, can't drive a car, but can make the decision to have his or her body chemically castrated or surgically mutilated. That's not a culture I want to grow up in. I don't want my grandchildren. I have 7 of them. 2 of them are girls. I don't want the 2 girls, one of whom is 12 years old. I do not want her to be in the girls' locker room and have a biological boy undressing in front of her and her being expected to undress in front of a biological boy. And if she says anything about it that it makes her uncomfortable, she's the one that gets into trouble. I don't want that for my grandchildren, and I bet you don't either for yours. But the election this year, let me be very blunt, is not as much a political decision for this country. I've been in politics for a little over 30 years. I've run for office, I've won offices, I've held office, I've served. But I can also tell you that what we're facing today is not the traditional historical political spectrum that is horizontal. Left versus the right. Liberal versus the conservative, Democrat versus the Republican. That's the horizontal spectrum that we have mostly lived under. We're no longer living in a horizontal world with horizontal issues. Folks, our issues today are vertical. They are up and down, heaven and hell, righteous and unrighteous, good and evil. And we have to understand that the battle is spiritual. The consequences will be political, but the underpinning of it, never kid ourselves, is spiritual. There's no other explanation for the hatred that is being leveled against the Jewish people and specifically the state of Israel. It's irrational. Who would have ever believed in our lifetime we would see on the major college campuses of America where college students would believe that it was perfectly okay to shut down the voices and even the ability of a Jewish student to walk across the campus? Look, I grew up in the 60s. My gosh, we had people taking over the president's office at college campuses arguing for free speech. Today, they're taking over the campuses to argue against free speech. This is a radical difference. We have people who don't see the world like we grew up seeing it. And the result is that we're living in a day where people think that it's perfectly okay for folks to burn down a city and trash a police car and burn down a police station. And the news media will say it's a mostly peaceful protest as the fire rages behind them. That's not a difference of opinion. Folks, this is insanity. We're living in an upside-down world. And when the theme of this conference, pray, vote, stand, I pray that you will embrace this as more than a slogan, that you will see it as a command. There are 40 million self-described evangelical Christians who do not vote in a presidential election. And let me explain what that means. If half of those people who sit in church on their blessed assurance would pray, stand, and vote, we would change every election in this country from the school board all the way to the White House. And if you look at their culture and you say, this culture is messed up. We've got people saying crazy stuff. We have people that don't know what a woman is. We appoint them to the Supreme Court. That makes sense, doesn't it? I'm for women's rights. I don't know what a woman is, but I'm for women's rights. This is crazy town business, people. So if we want to combat that, we better be salt. Otherwise, it gets worse and worse, and the putrefaction of our culture degenerates into something that is unrecognizable and unlivable. Wherever there is a lack of salt, there is rot. If you look at our culture and society today and say, it's rotting, it's because there's not any salt. And who's the salt? Are we expecting the politicians to deliver that? You shouldn't. God is expecting his children, the people in our pews. He's expecting us to be the salt. And he said, not you could be, you should be, you might be. He said, you are the salt of the earth. But are we acting like it? No, we enjoy going to church, and that's our huddle. But if you have huddles and you never run the play, you never can win the game. And folks, we have a lot of people that get gathered up for the huddle, then they leave the field. We need some people who will pray, vote, and stand. And that's why we're here.
Hi, everybody. I hope you're enjoying this episode so far of America's Hope. If you'd like to see it in its entirety, just click on the link below. Thanks for watching.